On this episode of Fancy Ramen, that's 129, we continue the lengthy discussion of Fire Emblem Three Houses.
We talk a little bit about my viewing of The Boys and Vinland Saga on Amazon Prime Video, and we finish off the session talking a little bit about Neil's experience with Poly Bridge, and I guess a dive into tactical RPGs in between Japanese and Western RPGs, the similarities that you don't always expect to find. It sounds to me like the Blue Lions have been underwhelming for you.
They have been. What I noticed is that I think that the Blue Lions Act 2 is significantly longer than Black Eagles Act 2.
Is that because you're at a point where you feel like, are you at Act 2 with the Blue Lions and at a point where you think the Black Eagles would have been done with their arc?
Yes, I mean, I don't know if this is a spoiler per se, but it's just, I mean, the very notion of there being acts is a spoiler, I guess, technically, but like for you specifically, wait, I guess you said you beat Golden Deer, right?
Yes. As we record this, I am a couple days out from finally completing the Golden Deer arc of Fire Emblem Three Houses, and I guess I shouldn't elaborate unless we're willing to
throw up like a deeper spoiler tag. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Before we go any deeper,
I think we maybe hold off until maybe we both have a couple routes done, or there's a point where we can really get into depth, because I think a lot of the interesting conversation will be held by comparing the different paths.
I believe so. Yeah, at least on the story end, I'm definitely getting exposure to the benefits of New Game Plus at this point.
Yeah.
With starting my Black Eagles route.
So what I'll say is that in the Black Eagles route, I played a certain number of months in Act 2, and I have exceeded that certain number of months by a few now in the Blue Lions route.
That's interesting. Okay.
It is interesting, and I'm not sure, again, like saving possible things that could happen, I'm not sure if the Blue Lions path is longer than the Golden Deer at this point, or if maybe the Black Eagles path is shorter than the other two.
I can say that the Golden Deer Act 2 felt relatively short.
Okay.
Yeah. And so maybe the consideration is, and this still doesn't spoil anything, but maybe events kick into motion for the Blue Lions before the key events of the Black Eagles or the Golden Deer start in Act 2. Because the Golden Deer definitely seem in Act 2 to be responding to events that the other houses could have already interacted with or set in motion. And I think that's remaining pretty spoiler free, but I definitely expected, I was curious about how long Act 2 would last, and based upon its length, if there would be an Act 3 or not, which there is not, at least for the Golden Deer.
Not until we spend $20 for DLC at the end of 2019.
Which I might. I am I'm enjoying this more than some of the previous Fire Emblems I've played.
Oh yeah, for sure.
This is probably on my like upper end of Fire Emblem games if I were ranking them.
I think if you can look past some of the graphical limitations and some of like, if you just embrace the positives of this game, I think it's probably my favorite Fire Emblem.
That is a big swing.
But like that's also that's under the premise of we're embracing the positives, you know?
Yeah, and I actually think I have tried to take that perspective into this. Though it definitely makes me consider the fact that There are plenty of contexts in which I think we could have been talking about this game in a way that was more critical of them releasing it instead of keeping it in the workshop for a little bit longer and continuing to polish up the game.
For sure.
Yeah. Go ahead.
So it's kind of like the way I kind of see our reception of the game, though, is similar to it might have been EGM that had, or actually, it might not have been EGM. It might have been GameSpot. That's not the store. That's the website. Yeah. Where their review system originally, I don't know if it still does, but originally was factored in that like you have different categories that you rate the game and they all factor in like a weighted system that results in the score of the game at the end. But one of those categories I think was like intangibles or fun or something. That is the thing that you otherwise have like a really hard time describing. And I think like what kept us from being overly critical, or at least more critical than we were, was that Three Houses happened to check that box really well for at least the two of us.
Yeah, whatever the metric is that the intangibles would be scored at, if we were to follow that, I would give it an incredibly high score, if not a perfect score, on just like, oh, this game has a je ne sais quoi to it that I have a hard time completely describing because I think it's a bunch of minor parts working together in a fluid way, but it's very good and enjoyable and intuitively fun.
It's dare I say, like this game will probably end up having like a Persona 3 style or like a Persona 3 resonance with me, where I had very hard times. Like, granted, I didn't think so critically about games back then either, but it was much harder for me to like point out the flaws of Persona 3 when that game came out and when I played through it the first time. And it was only like years afterwards that I looked back at Persona 3 and started to like become not hypercritical, but was, it's like once I get more detached from Three Houses, I'm finding it easier to criticize the game for some of those points. But just because I haven't been playing it really that much this week, though, doesn't mean that I have stopped, like I'm going to stop playing it. I definitely want to get through Blue Lions and start Golden Deer. I think it's just the fact that Blue Lions is taking longer than I expected.
Fest? Oh.
What? Sorry?
I was going to say, is a snooze fest.
It actually gets better, but it gets interesting. So it goes in a direction I did not assume it was going to go, but at the same time, like, I also don't think the path does justice when you play Black Eagles first.
Right. I was wondering if maybe leaving Black Eagles for last was going to be the right choice for me, but I kind of buckled under just the excitement to play it and find out what you and I think most players, because just the popularity statistics in the game definitely identified that the Black Eagles were the most popular first route. I didn't want to miss out any longer. I wanted to see what it was all about. And I think I was more captivated or intrigued by the units in the Black Eagles than the Blue Lions. I'm going to try and recruit some Lions, but that's about it.
It's actually pretty crazy how polarizing of a character Edelgard is for like a lot of the online community surrounding Three Houses. I have like just from essentially looking at the threads, not even going into them, but just looking at the topics. Like it's basically like a hate thread, and then like an endorsement or appreciation thread followed by another hate thread. So I'm really curious. And on the flip side, I feel like I have only read good things about Claude, so
I don't see where his negatives lie. After completing it, I definitely think although he may not give the best first impression for players, there's just like there's really no negatives in his personality, I think, for anybody to pick up on. While Edelgard, immediately, like, her character is interesting and I like her, but she definitely is a more abrasive leader than Claude was, and therefore I think I can see how people's opinions can definitely be swayed. Also, I mean, if we're talking about just the relationship demonstrated between, say, each house leader and their, let's say, like, primary, their second in command. We have Dudu for the Blue Lions. We have Hilda for the Golden Deer, and then we have Hubert for the Black Eagles. Hubert is an incredibly polarizing figure in the fact that he outright threatens to kill your character in the first support conversation you have if you are to disappoint or go against Lady Edelgard's goals or wishes. So I think that's a pretty big difference than, say, I imagine Dudu is a little bit friendlier, if not just as doting, and for sure Hilda is like mostly disinterested in Claude and is around to like lighten the mood, but otherwise wants to slack off as much as possible
and manipulate men.
Yeah, she's very, very good at manipulating. Well, not just men. She's very good at manipulating in general, but her character has very satisfying support interactions too, because she's manipulative in the most like honest and kind-hearted way, where she'll openly say, like, I'm trying to get you to do this for me, but if you don't want to do it for me, I'm not going to force you. Which for some characters makes for very fun conversations. For other ones, it's I think a little less honest, and that's to the benefit of the entertainment. Like, she pretty much strings Claude along, or not Claude, I'm sorry, Lorenz, the like prissy noble with the purple hair in the Golden Deer, for pretty much all of the support conversations.
Can we put one thing on the table real quick?
Absolutely.
Lorenz, his quote-unquote war costume is like way better than it needs to be.
Oh, his rose armor?
His hair actually looks cool.
Yeah, it does. It makes up for how bad it looks during the Academy character design.
Like, outside of the fact that there's a character that actually puts on clothes that fit him, which is obviously like the biggest improvement, Lorenz has like the second best improvement of appearance from, one costume to the other.
Are you trying to make a slight at Raphael busting through his shirt?
Maybe.
Okay. Well, it makes for one very easy lost item. When you find a button that's been popped off of a shirt, I don't know how many players would have like been puzzled as to who that belongs to. Yeah, his rose armor is sweet. Like, it's a very good look, but sadly, when I beat the game, like, he was definitely my least used unit from the class. I didn't really put him to good use. I picked up a couple church staff who had better value, I think, overall. Which I'm also curious, depending on how I go on this Black Eagles route, if I'm going to really have that church staff in the future. So I might have a smaller roster than I expect.
You might. You just might. Or you might have a larger roster.
Huh.
Who knows, Scott? Who knows? Did you do anything aside from play Three Houses?
I picked up two shows. One was at the recommendation of Cuki, and that was The Boys. And actually, I think both of the shows I picked up were Amazon Prime shows. Or I guess Amazon Video. Is that what it's called? I use it rarely enough that I actually can't remember what. I think it's called Amazon Prime Video. Okay. But there are two shows. One of them is The Boys, which Cookie had recommended, if not on air, then shortly after recording off air. And that is probably the best media I've seen relevant to superheroes since the, I guess, superhero craze of the past decade. Mostly because the show doesn't focus on the superheroes as protagonists so much, but instead the collateral damage that they cause to the people around them. And by depicting these superheroes not as both paradigms of humanity in like skill and ability, but also as deeply human in their flaws, it made for a much more enjoyable experience than I had initially expected. And I was really glad I picked it up at his recommendation. If somebody's looking for a good, like, I would say maybe like revenge / heist style TV show, The Boys kind of really scratches that itch in a fun way. But the second one I picked up that's a little more fancy ramen adjacent is a anime called Vinland Saga, and I don't know if you've ever heard of it, Neil, but I would say that it seems to be attempting to pull off the same type of, I don't know, like, I guess epic narrative that we haven't seen in a while in anime, or at least like from a more realistic, I don't want to say a realistic historical fiction, but from a more realistically bound historical fiction about a Viking youth in, I believe it is the like 11th or 12th century. There's not enough detail for me to go on exactly how Vinland plays into it yet. But from what I understand, it's adapted off of a manga called Vinland Saga. So I imagine at some point in time there will be a journey to the discovered land. But the first episode does start with Leif Erikson telling a story of discovering the new continent, and all of the children and adults razzing him about his apparent like lies and falsehoods that there's another continent across the sea. And of course, in the like best form of, you know, scientific discussion and inquiry, providing the counterpoint that the sea is supposed to like just drop off at the edge of the world at some point, and it's blocked by a giant sea serpent. So Leif doesn't seem to have the whole community on his side in this one, but it reminds me of the Golden Arc from Berserk, if you ever saw those movies.
Oh, yeah, no, actually, as soon as I looked up Vinland Saga, I looked at, granted, their thumbnails, but like I instantly thought you were going to say it's another like Berserk when you were opening this up.
Berserk, the television show is bad, is like, I think very obviously bad because of the just like blind reliance on the sort of like 3D computer animation that they inject. And also there are multiple points at which the story starts depending on the medium from or I guess depending on the medium, from manga to anime to like OVA. And I think that the shows normally just start at kind of a weird spot for the story, where I think that the Golden Arc did a much better job. And even the manga maybe isn't great, but the manga tries for a little bit more of a hook format, where it tries to hook you in with like high action and consequence before telling you backstory, while the Golden Arc has a more traditional like story building from a chronological point of view.
Yeah, the manga, from what I remember, starts you off like partway through Guts' story, and then after like the first main arc, you go into a flashback and then start to see everything more chronologically, minus the time skip.
Exactly. Yeah. No, the manga does it where Guts's primary like trauma is not explained until after the first arc is completed. Then that's where essentially his origin story plays out before returning to the present. The Golden Arc just starts chronologically with Guts as a child, as a mercenary. And that's it. I'm getting definitely the vibes of that arc of Berserk in this Vinland Saga. It is focused on a boy named Thorfinn, who is an Icelandic Viking whose dad is a deserted Viking soldier from, I think, a battle approximately 15 years ago. And so like that's where it starts, and it definitely like there from the intro, it's obvious that the anime will focus primarily on Thorfinn, but there's actually been a lot of focus on his father figure. I think it's Yorm. No, what is it? Thor's. Sorry, he's a Yoms Viking or a Yorms Viking or something when he's a soldier. But it focuses on his dad, I think, for a while to kind of build up the like father figure and ideal that he looks up to, and then without spoiling anything, it transitions to Thorfinn after a couple episodes. But it's just been a gorgeous anime, and the historical depictions or the depictions of these like historical technologies and tasks and like geopolitics are really interesting as well. They're very, I guess I shouldn't say like they're very legitimate. They're very believable. I don't have enough expertise to call out how accurate they are, but they certainly seem to have an eye for detail and a like respect for the setting that they're working within. It might be my favorite anime I've seen this year so far. So, I believe Amazon has it slated for 24 episodes. It's just getting started. I believe there are 7 episodes out now, and I'm about halfway through. I've watched 4.
I'll give the manga a shot and see how it is.
Yeah, I hear the manga is also exceptionally good. So if you like that, maybe you can check out the adaptation. But the source material seems to be of high quality as well. I think other than that, I don't know if I've done much else. Not particularly. Have you done anything else exciting, Neil?
Now, I played some Polybridge.
Is that the bridge building game where you try and get cars across different obstacles?
And sometimes boats underneath or whatever. Like
right.
There are certain conditions that you have to fulfill. Yeah. I got through like a set of introduction chapters or maps, and then like a few of these like first quote unquote world. It's like 1-1, 1-2, 1-1, so to speak, all the way to 1-10, and then it goes to 2-. I went through like a handful of chapters or bridges.
Mm-hmm.
And why I say it's probably not a great game to put down and pick back up without like really getting a good grip on things is because I've been stuck on the first hydraulic drawbridge puzzle because I can't figure out how to get the hydraulic pieces to work properly. In doing so, I kind of told myself I wouldn't just go and look it up because it's actually hilarious seeing like my lack of understanding. And so that's actually like a flaw in the game. Like I had a tutorial chapter or map where it taught me how to use hydraulics or hydraulic pieces, but now I don't know how to get back to it. So I'm in this situation where like I have the hydraulic piece, but the game is like relatively intense in terms of like how complicated your builds can get. It can be simple too, but I just don't know how to get this hydraulic piece to work. So I told myself, because it's hilarious actually, I'm not going to look up how to get the hydraulic piece to work. And so I'll spend like 5 to 10 minutes like building a whole new bridge idea, like with my limited knowledge of how the hydraulic system works and my limitation of like, well, since I don't know how it works, I'm going to try and build like a really goofy ass bridge to see if I can get anything to work. And watching it like just collapse on itself somehow magically, or like, actually through physics, because my hydraulic system is fucked up, is like some of the funniest shit I've seen in a game in a while.
Hopefully you're running the camera while you're playing.
I'm not streaming this, unfortunately, so no camera. But
you're not constantly recording your gameplay.
You think I
I think you should, yeah.
But it's kind of got like a Kerbal Space Program feel to it in terms of just it being outright ridiculous at times. Except it's a game that's way easier just to boot up and play it for like 20 minutes and then put it back down. Whereas Kerbal, it's like you kind of have to spend some good amount of time to, get your crazy radical spaceship idea and go on these weird narrative journeys, your self-narrative journeys if you're playing in the free mode. But aside from that, I don't think there's really much else to talk about. I think I picked up Nier Automata to show my coworker, my friend, and to try and convince him to play it. And in the process, I
got sucked back in.
I'm considering starting it back up because that, like, playing it again has kind of like brought to light different perspectives on like some of the opening scripts and some of the dialogue between the characters that really like drives home. I guess like these interesting things that you would otherwise not notice if you hadn't played the game before, like in particular 9S's and 2B's interactions, the way 2B conducts herself in general. It's sort of like, it's almost like The Sixth Sense, where
watching it a second time reveals a whole different movie, essentially.
Yeah, where you realize like the kid's not standoffish. The kid is just fucking terrified to have to talk to a ghost the entirety of the movie. But in doing so, like, there was like a problem I just kind of dealt with when I was playing Nier the first time through, and that was like the fact that the PC port does not want to actually play in 1080p full screen.
Oh, is it really having issues with that?
Oh, for sure. It's absolutely a problem. In fact, there are like multiple fixes out there. One in particular is called FAR, FAR. It stands for Fix Automata Resolution.
Yeah. Near, far, wherever you are.
And the mod is actually really extensive and does a lot of things like fixes the weird frame drop hiccups during cutscenes. So overall, like very, very, I would almost even say essential to playing that game on PC now. But when I first installed it and was trying to show Nier to my friend, I must have hit something because I noticed as I was going through the opening like shmup part of the game that things didn't feel right. But it was passable. For some reason, when you went into the robot form, like the controls were backwards, the movement controls.
Okay.
And I was zoomed in a little more than I remember. But it became completely clear that once you went into the corridor of the base, and normally the game would go into like a side-scrolling shmup appearance or a viewpoint, the camera never changed. So I was just directly behind the ship during that point in time.
That's weird.
Yeah, and it was basically a result of apparently FAR has a utility or something built into it that if you hit, I believe it's backspace, or not backspace, sorry, backslash, that it locks the camera in that position or gives you control of the camera using other keyboard key or keystrokes for commands. So I had inadvertently locked my camera in a position that was like basically kind of like over, kind of like Bloodborne, like vantage point, if you want to think of it that way, except it's behind a ship instead of a person. And I was playing through the opening chapter of this game, being like, "What the fuck is going on?" But
I'm sure it was not well designed, or at least it was a lot more difficult to do the shoot 'em up portion of that.
Well, it was really curious because I think the viewpoint also restricted my movement. So I could only go as high and as low as like the camera allowed. So during like the opening shmup part, which is basically overhead, because I was zoomed in closer, I could only move between like essentially the two ships to my direct left and right, which also meant like I was gonna get hit by a laser.
And that's why you take the shield special ability.
Yes, exactly. But I'm pretty sure if I put it back on now, I know what happened. I just can't hit the / key, and it should be fine. So because of that, now I'm really interested in playing Automata with that fix on to see like how smooth some of these cutscenes are and so forth, because it did not play extremely well when I was playing it on PC before because of it being kind of a shitty port.
It's funny because I played it on computer the whole time, and I don't know if I had any graphical issues at all. But I must have just lucked out.
It could be. I'm curious if maybe I actually knew a bit more about this before, and there was like some sort of weird fix I managed to make work before, but it never solved the fact that the cutscenes were like running at what felt like 15 to 15, anywhere between like 15 to 30 frames per second most of the time. And after looking at comparisons of the FAR Fix, the cutscenes in particular look like dramatically improved. So while we're on that topic, I've been spending some time looking at Final Fantasy Tactics. We talked about this together, and mostly because I felt like this would be a great game for you to play because it's essentially the closest thing you'd get to like, you know, a resolution to Game of Thrones.
Okay.
But I mean, not really, but like it is based off of the War of the Roses,
right?
Just like A Song of Ice and Fire, and I'm kind of having like the member berries of like how impressive the story was for that day and age. Like, might be one of the better video game stories, save for the fact that there's no voice acting and there's really no like CG or FMV cutscenes, that sort of thing.
Would it further scratch the Fire Emblem itch?
Yeah, although like I think it goes into a depth and complexity that, not to say that like Three Houses or the more recent Fire Emblem games cannot be complex, because they can be, but Final Fantasy Tactics is like a different sort of complex. Like, I mean, to illustrate this point, your characters can jump on top of buildings if they happen to have a high enough jump stat, that sort of thing.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And being on top of buildings or like on the high ground in general means that you're going to be able to shoot your arrows farther, that sort of thing. So
is the jump stat a literal stat, or is it like an athletics, acrobatics, or like dexterity stat?
It is its own stat. So movement and jump are two individual stats that change based upon what class they are and what equipment you have. So like there's like a apps. I mean, I don't know if it's like iconic, but I would totally view it as like as someone that likes the older Final Fantasy games. There's an iconic class called Dragoon, which is known for essentially just jumping super high up in the air, at which during this time you can't get hit, and then they drop on the enemy afterwards. So that like that type of class, or a ninja, or anyone that would be acrobatic, is going to have a higher movement stat, which means, you know, the number of spaces that they can move, but also have like a higher jump stat. So if there's like a short building, they might just be able to hop on top of it. Or like there's going to be like different types of terrain where there is a path that is like one height block in difference, then another height block in difference, and then another. but like it might be kind of like a zigzag to go up that path. Whereas there's also a path that is two heights, a change in height by 2 units.
And it's more linear.
Yeah, so if you have a mage, they might not be able to make those bigger jumps, but if you had like a squire or maybe even a knight, but like definitely an archer, some of these lighter units, they'll be able to make those jumps.
Gotcha.
So, but that game, and I guess I can talk to you about this to some degree because this is something that you might want to try out or play if you were going to go down this route. There are essentially 2 versions of the game. The first one is like your traditional PlayStation, early PlayStation-ish era translation or localization, which means that because it's Square and they're infamous for like their kind of weird localizations at times, there's a lot of quirk, and you could argue charm to the translation. But they did do a re-release for the PSP called War of the Lions, which, I mean, even further like shoves down the War of the Roses narrative into your face. And that one does have a re-localization, and they do take the approach of making everything sound authentic English, if you know what I mean.
Okay. Versus the maybe a little, I don't want to say clumsier, but the previous localization and translation that had more of those quirks that you appreciated.
And not even just that, but it's like literally like not old English, but older English versus the original localization, which was just modern, straight up, everyday English, today's English.
Oh, okay. So yeah, the ye old English that sometimes occurs in our more like historical or fantasy video games that occur.
Right.
Octopath Traveler English is what we can call it, because I think Octopath Traveler actually does a good job of demonstrating that, like having sort of an older English vibe, and specifically with like what's Hanet the Hunter, like her village having the especially older, more formal English approach to their speech.
One of the earliest lines you get from a character in the original, and this is really not that big of a deal to me. I'm actually like curious to see what differences I'll get from it, because like granted, I don't remember that much about FFT, but it might as I start playing the game. One of the first lines in the game is from a character leaving after doing something, we'll say like bad to the protagonists. And he says, "Don't blame me, blame yourself or God." And apparently in the retranslation, it is, "Forgive me, 'tis your birth and faith that wrong you, not I." So it's not only a change in tone, but also it's like the fake old English, that kind of puts into.
More tises, more verilies, a couple of haths thrown in somewhere.
Yeah, basically. But
gotcha.
In any case, though, the PSP version does offer like new classes and more reasons why you'd want to play it for just the features alone. The problem is that there is essentially a coding error that causes noticeable lag when you are playing or when you're casting any type of magic, I guess. So you actually, and this is part of what I've been doing because I'm thinking about, I've been like looking into this because I'm thinking about streaming it and I don't know exactly which way I'm going to stream it. There are patches out there that you need to utilize that will essentially fix the slowdown. But I'm also finding that like there is a community called Final Fantasy Hactics that has gone so far to mod and hack the PlayStation ROM to make it like more complex, more difficult, a better experience overall, fix, some original bugs in the game, modify other aspects of the game that a lot of people like that people find polarizing. It's just surprising that like a game that is probably now 2 decades old, if not more. No, I might be wrong on that. 2000. No way. This is like 95, I think 97. Let me double check. 97. Yeah. So more than 2 decades old. It's crazy to see the community that exists for this game. And it's got to be a testament to like how much of a, I guess you could say how much of a cult classic or just in general popular game that FFT is. So I'm kind of going back and forth on like what version I want to play at this point. But yeah, no, I think it'd certainly be worth giving it a try in one way or another.
I'm excited to hear you talk about, especially your your appreciation for the verticality and the mobility elements of the game for Final Fantasy Tactics. If we do organize our Let's Play for Divinity Original Sin, like it is a Western RPG, so it is a totally different beast than, say, the like ode to JRPGs that Final Fantasy Tactics is. But it's another game that really appreciates not only your ability to, say, cast spells and deal damage, but your tactical placement in a way that, say, Fire Emblem's grid system just doesn't have the opportunity to allow for, with it being a 2-dimensional space and not a 3-dimensional space, or I should say like a space with depth as well as like height and width.
I kind of forgot that we were going to do something for that, and
I still think
we need to do it.
Still think we should. It's just I have become more and more excited for this Baldur's Gate 3 game coming out, and I've wondered if there's a multiplayer option with that. If we don't instead consider that option, if it's going to take us a while to implement the Let's Play.
Did you play Baldur's Gate 1 and 2?
No, I didn't. They were really, really popular games amongst some like more hardcore gamer friends of mine when I was younger. And so I know that they have a pretty like dedicated following, but personally, I don't have any experience with the previous two. And I don't believe that those two Baldur's Gates were by... I need to check to make sure that these are from a different developer than Larian.
So they were BioWare, if I'm not mistaken. I'm actually going to double check that.
The developers of the original Baldur's Gate, I guess, was Larian Studios. Interesting.
Developers.
So, let me find Baldur's Gate 2's developers. That developer was Beamdog, who also worked on the previous Baldur's Gate, and then the engine was the BioWare engine.
Wait. Maybe my sources are... I'm going off of Wikipedia, but Baldur's Gate 1... Mm-hmm. Developers listed here are BioWare and Black Isle Studios.
Very interesting. I'm also looking at the Wikipedia, and I have developers as Larian Studios, Beamdog, Snowblind, and MORE.
Oh, wait. Are you looking at like a reissue, or...
Maybe it's the enhanced edition. Developers, BioWare and Black Isle Studios. So, maybe it is the enhanced edition that...
but that being said, I was under the... Okay, this is where like I feel as if I might be misremembering or misattributing other memories of like other companies. But is there a possibility that there are key staffers from BioWare
in Larian? I believe so. Yeah, I if I remember correctly, Divinity Original Sin actually came about as a Kickstarter project. I know for a fact that Divinity Original Sin 2 is a Kickstarter project for Larian Studios. But I believe the first one that they made was as well. And part of the way they were able to secure that capital is because they had developers or designers from the Baldur's Gate games in their staff that really, I think, solidified consumer confidence in backing the projects.
I could be wrong. I'm not finding any sort of backing evidence at this point. But in any case, obviously BioWare is in no position to make Baldur's Gate 3.
Absolutely not.
So why I bring that up, though, is that I am hesitant to believe that there's going to be multiplayer in a Baldur's Gate 3 just by the nature of the first two games being centered around the protagonist as the ball spawn.
Okay.
And like, without giving away spoilers, because it is essentially the essence of the series, the ball spawn, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, because otherwise it just sounds like I'm making a fucking testicle joke. The protagonist is one of many children of a god, basically. And like, still human? Can you pick another race in that game? I don't remember. I don't think so.
In Baldur's Gate, I do not know. The only times I've seen it played, it's been with a human character. And there's no, like, none of the promotional materials for the third game have really demonstrated what your character would look like yet.
Yeah, so you're basically a quote-unquote human, but you have essentially, like, God of War blood. And, like, I'm going to say I haven't played Baldur's Gate in years, so I might forget entirely who Ball is. Being ball spawn, you are essentially the child of this god or lesser god or something. But the whole idea is essentially that, like, ball spawn are like bad because they're going to be prone to, like, essentially being taken over by ball or taken over by demons or some bullshit. I don't really recall, but like, looking at Baldur's Gate 3, the teaser that we got, I don't know if that's supposed to be a reference to some other sort of spawn doing that, not necessarily ball spawn, but in any case, though, the first two games were solely single player and relied upon, like, the character's existence, the protagonist's existence as this very specific type of character, as opposed to, like, you know, Divinity Original Sin, where you customize your protagonist, or, like, say, to make a loose comparison to, like, Elder Scrolls games where you are whoever you want to be. You just happen to be in handcuffs before, you know, the start of the game.
No matter what race you choose or, like, origin story you want to have in your head, you end up the Dovahkiin either way. It's just, are you the orc Dovahkiin or the lizard Dovahkiin or the deformed half-elf Dovahkiin?
God, the elves in those games look hideous. But anyways, getting off topic, it would be awesome if they could implement, or sorry, I'm getting like overly supportive of something that might not necessarily work out. But the big focus on Baldur's Gate was like this, or not big focus, but one of the focuses in the game was the crazy elaborate relationship camaraderie system built into it, like side quests, huge conversations. We're talking, this is hyperbole, but books of text. Like, it really puts Dragon Age Origins to shame when you compare the amount of content that, like, Baldur's Gate 2 had versus DOA. Granted, Dragon Age Origins also had everything voiced, so there was a restraint on, like, what they could offer. Dragon Age DAO, my bad.
DAO, yeah. I didn't want to call you on
point that out to me.
That's okay.
But in any case, like, if you start taking away party members to put in player characters, like, I wonder what, like, how you effectively execute that while still having meaningful other party members, or maybe they wouldn't be party members at that point.
I mean, they seem to have found a way to do it. And granted, I stopped playing Divinity actually in the anticipation that we would be playing it some more, as to not, like, spoil or color any of my decisions as we move forward through the Let's Play.
Sure.
But as I have played it through what is the, like, intro portion of the game, it is definitely like it's really well done in the fact that they do have all of their characters voiced, and I think they get around some like essentially not having like a massive voice cast by oftentimes having the narrator take over some voiced parts to give like expository information as opposed to dialogue directly from a character. And they're able to make it work for multiple players in the game, all playing what I believe are protagonists with maybe conflicting end games, but otherwise overlapping areas of interest and interactions in the game world. And so it seems like it could be a possibility if they choose to deviate from that in Baldur's Gate, but it also could be a core element of Divinity Original Sin and one of the things that makes it unique from their Baldur's Gate iterations.
Yeah, the more I think about it, the more I don't want them to focus on like multiplayer if it means detracting what, I mean, granted, they didn't make Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, but like if it means taking away the emphasis that those two games had for party interactions. Because what made those games so interesting for their time too was the fact that like you know it's D&D, right? And so you also have that two axes alignment between good, neutral, evil, law, neutral, chaos. And so that actually played like a part. I don't know if like the grid itself played a part, but like there are definitely interactions between certain party members that you could get that would basically involve or may result in one of your characters murdering the other character or fighting it out in front of you and you having to potentially pick sides.
Right.
Like those were the types of things that like I really, really appreciated from Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, because like those games in comparison to like JRPGs, which are, you know, going to be essentially like the closest counterpart I have to compare them off of as a kid, those games had like this huge degree of flexibility and freedom of how you played them and who you picked and so forth. Whereas like a JRPG can like offer that same degree of intrigue and like conflict within a party, but it's all authored to work that specific way. Whereas Baldur's Gate 1 and 2, like, yes, it was quote unquote authored, but like it's up to the player essentially to trigger the conditional flags or to even set up a situation where that would actually happen.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's, I guess we're talking about the difference between a linear and non-linear story. Anyways, though, I think we've exhausted the topics I cared to talk about.
Right. If you want to fill more time, I'll talk Fire Emblem Three Houses all day, but I can also save it for our wrap up here. I'm gonna try and move through the Black Eagles pretty quickly, and we'll see if I entertain the idea of playing the Blue Lions or if I just go ahead and take a pass.
I'm curious. I
may choose the church over them. There's always that option as well.
There is. If you have comments, questions, or corrections, you can write into podcast@fancyramen.com.
Please leave a like and review if you enjoy the podcast on whatever podcasting platform you're using. And tell a friend about our podcast. It's the best way for us to acquire new listeners is by word of mouth and support from our already much appreciated loyal listener base.
That will be it for this episode. We'll see you soon.
Enjoy your vacation, Cuki.
Death Stranding will allow you to weaponize piss. Well, why don't I read these during the podcast?
I know, man. Kojima is an innovator. Sometimes he takes it too far.
Oh, God. If enough players pee in the same spot, something good will happen, Kojima teased. During the footage, we saw a mushroom go bigger as a result of the pee.
Is that supposed to be a metaphor for Norman Reedus?
God, I have no fucking clue. This is weird. All right.
Where'd you find this?
This is a Polygon article, which we know Polygon has the best,
They do have the inside scoops.
Yeah, Polygon is never wrong. We all know that.
Right. They've never made a mistake.
Oh my
and that's why
God, there's literally a scene of him peeing here. And funny enough, if you try and move the camera to see his penis, Norman Reedus...
Does he shake his head at you?
Norman Reedus, quickly jolts away from the camera.
Okay, yeah, so whatever you do, he responds with shame.
Jesus, this is a fucking weird game.
Yeah, we still don't know exactly what we're doing. Like Metal Gear Solid, you know that you're going to be doing sneaking. And you have the basic idea of why you're sneaking. But this package delivery has no explanation whatsoever.
It's like if you just were if you were playing Metal Gear Solid 5 mixed with Red Dead Redemption, and by that I mean you have a bunch of time where you're not doing anything when you're traveling. That's what I envision this game could be.
Which I don't know if I'm interested in that. Oh well, we'll see.
All right, yeah.
I will I'll send this file your way, Neil. I'll catch you later.
Cool. Take your time. Have a good day.
Bye.